Hello, this is Chuck with Pocket Snakes. I'm going to take and wet stretch some leather string. So first kind of undo the string best I can, because it's easiest to compile this through. This is a hank of 100 and some feet of kind of wide cut string. I'm throwing it in the bottom of the bucket. Hopefully the bucket will catch some of the water. So you wrap it around this hook a couple times. You're pulling it, which will compress the string and squeeze the water out. And stretches the string from wide to narrow. So that's kind of the goal. You never lose the leather, it just compacts it and narrows it. Drop it back in the same bucket. And you will break the string as you do this, but you want it to break where it's weak. And the reason you want to break it where it's weak is that way you know where it's going to break, because you definitely don't want to be working on braiding stuff and have it break right in the middle of your finally getting it stretched out. And so this went from 3/8 of an inch down to 4 millimeters. Like this is 1/8 of an inch or 3/16 now. So I've got cut kind of in half. And I'm just going to hang that piece of string. And this first hank is from the outside of a hide, so it's going to have some areas where it's not going to want to. It's going to have some areas with some holes and some weak areas where the clamps were. And so you don't ever, I try never to throw away string when it breaks short. After I wet compacted it, it's still got some things I can do with it. It's part of the whip making process. Again, you can see the difference in width. And if it breaks, that's okay too. Take the piece. And I mean, I can spin that into a bracelet or other things. I don't have to use it for a whip. This is just taking all of the stretch out of this. This is Veg Tan Kangaroo for what it's worth. It could be almost any leather that's Veg Tan that you want to stretch. I expect this first hank to break in lots of places because it's leg sections and belly sections, and it's the worst part of this material. And there's a lot of gotchas. This is necking down to almost 1/8 of an inch around this leg section. But if it's strong enough to run through the hook, you can trim it up and use it for sewing or other things. Pulling with about 20-25 pounds on my right hand and feeding it in at 5. Hi. See if I can get my glasses so I can read the screen so I can interact a little bit. Maria Lopez. Well, hello there. So I'm just wet stretching some rough cut kangaroo lace to see if it is strong enough, find where it's weak. Wherever it's weak, I'm going to stretch it both directions. And going through that knot that's formed by rolling the leather squeezes out most of the water and compacts the lace, takes all the stretch out of it. It's good when you're spinning the leather or making a whip, either one. So this is the worst part of the hide that it broke while I was cutting it, and I was like, well, I cut it really wide. Pieces that are a foot long or shorter when they break, I still save them, but they're less useful than 3 or 4 foot sections. Corgi hairs have found my fingers. You know, I'm trying to keep the corgi hair out of this. If you guys have questions, feel free to type me a comment. If you want to subscribe because you like watching people make things. I'll probably spin some bracelets and things or braid some things that are shorter out of these strips that are breaking off. Yeah, the walls get peppered with stuff. They just get wiped down. It's got special paint to make it easy to clean the stuff off. But yeah, don't do this in a rental house for sure. Probably not the best idea. Tell people all the time, do what I suggest more than what I do, but I try and share how I do what I do. Which is not to say it's the only way or the right way or whatever. Just showing you one way that works for some of this. I've got a bigger hank coming after I get this one kind of stretched out. This process takes most of the stretch out of the leather, and what you lose in width, you gain in thickness and length. Some sort of combination of that. Like I said, this piece of string is pretty weak. But you'd rather hit break while you're trying to wet stretch it than while you're braiding it. This is some light brown lace, but when you get it wet, it gets dark brown. You can see the difference between the two in width. It's gone from 3/8 to 1/8. All the flea bites and stuff in it. Hope I don't end up with just a whole bunch of 1-foot pieces. But sometimes you do. I could tell that this section was going to have a bunch of issues. This is where I let the knife slip a little bit too much. It went under the fence that I was using. And it's weak. Kind of a bad combination all around. This is why I shoot things live. If it's going to be nasty and break, shows you how frustrating some of these processes are. And I can't stress it enough. You really want this stuff to break while you're stretching it, not while you're in the middle of a project braiding it. You would far prefer that it snap in half rather than 4 foot into braiding something that it just is going to break and you'll have to restart the project. This piece started off probably 75, 80 foot long. What comes out compared to what goes in, it's soft and squishy when it goes in. It comes out hard and compacted with almost no stretch. Here's a 3 foot piece. Down to the last 15, 20 feet. Go back and look at the screen, see if anybody's asking any questions. Hey, guy down the street. I am wet stretching some kangaroo leather. So this happens to be the sketchy part of the hide that's thin, has a lot of gotchas, and I rough cut the lace, and now I'm stretching it and squeezing the water out because I'm wet stretching it. Trying to make the lace uniform and strong. Find where it's going to break before I start braiding it. A 2 foot piece. It goes through a lot of force in that loop. That little spot will probably break too. It didn't. Interesting. Beginning to believe that wet stretching it. Might not have been the way to go with this. Okay. So here's the rest of that hide. There's a lot of sharp bends in it. This part of the hide seems to be a lot stronger than the other part, which is good because I was worried I was going to just break everything as I was working this. Make an hour of stripping this kind of moot. This string is about 1/4 inch being trimmed down or being stretched out to a little over 1/8, maybe 3/16. So this part of the hide is from the center of the hide. It's pretty robust, and it's density and stretchiness anyway. But if there's a bug bite, I want to find it a weak spot. Part of what makes a good whip is getting it to 0 stretch. Or as close to 0 as you can. Then as you compact the layers with tension, the tension doesn't change. The tension just stays put. Check the screen again. Now somebody says, is this hide cheaper, significantly cheaper than cow? No, it's more expensive per square foot by a long ways. It's way stronger. Cowhide is very hard to do this with and have it hold together with as much strength as I'm pulling on this. Okay. So I'll run this back through the other direction. Now I've squeezed most of the water out of here. This has not been resized, it's just been wet stretch from rough cut. Any stretch the first pass doesn't get, the second pass makes it more uniform. Just wet stretching some leather. Okay. So, I'm just gonna quickly make a burrito out of this. This is all one piece of cord that's been wet stretched. That way I can throw it in a plastic bag and or a bucket and put a lid on it. Keep the moisture level tempered where it is, which is stretched out but still got dampness. And that way I can bevel this whole strip so that it's all uniform. I'll bevel it and even it up at the same time. This is now very, very strong, wet, compacted lace. Totally different item than rough cut lace. Most of this stuff you could pull 80 pounds or 90 pounds probably on once it dries and not break the strand at an eighth of an inch. Not sure how many 100 feet this is. That's quite a bit. Trying to keep the skin side down and the flesh side up. That way it bails out when I go to resize it. That way I can pull it out and make bolo ties or whips or whatever with pre-stretched, pre-wet stretched string. Use it to tie fancy knots for decorative work, whatever. Down the last 10 feet. Just tie an overhand knot through it just to hold it shape. There's a burrito of a few 100 feet of wet stretch lace. I'm snapping into a bucket. See if there's any questions. Oh, I'm glad you like watching it. I'm pulling strips not for lacing. You could use it for lacing. I stretch it to braid whips because that's what I do, but you could use it for lacing stuff together. Same idea. You can see the difference between stretched and not stretched. Now this piece is going to break more as I pull it through. More often it's going to break, because this is the center of the hide still, but it's working its way to the outside. There's an art to everything, right? So that's the difference. In, out. In, out. And then I'll resize it to make it perfect and bevel it at the same time. By the way, just for your information, yes, it does tear up your hands. Pulling 20 or 30 pounds on 1/8 of an inch. On my right hand and my left hand, I'm feeding it at about 10 of back tension to get a consistent amount of tension on it as it rolls through the double loop. Again, in versus out. And this string is pretty rough cut. I tried to make it more consistent in places, but it's kind of like water squeezing out of the string. Like I said, it's going to break more as I go to the outside. I'm going to re-stretch this piece the other direction. Make sure that I didn't create more weaknesses than I solved. Squeeze more water out of it. But if you've ever been braiding or lacing and snap a piece of string that you're trying to seat, this is one way to reduce your frustration in the later creative process. Plus, it's very satisfying to squeeze the water out and stretch it out. You got a cup of water down below trying to get in my way. Notice the inbound and outbound are almost identical. So it's not much different now. This also verifies that everything's about as compact as it can be. Believe it or not, it'll compress down even more with braiding it a little bit. Especially if you braid it with 70 or 80 pounds. Seat it with 70, 80 pounds of tension. Okay, I'm going to braid this up and get some sense of how consistent it ended up. It's not perfect, but you can bevel it and resize it and end up with your idea of perfection if you work at it. And I'm more than perfectionistic about the string I start with. No matter how good your braiding is, if the string is shit, so will the end result be. It's all about the string you start with. it's worth investing the time and energy into getting it as perfect as you can. If you care if the output or outcome if you care that the outcome is going to be at an artistic level at some point. There's some more wet stretch lace. So I'm going to toss this back in a bucket with where to keep its moisture. See what questions we have. I've been doing this for a lot of years, Eric, or Eden Star. Thank you for the comments. Yeah, they're blisters of love, all right. You learn to appreciate your blisters and scars as you work with razor blades and try and make things from scratch. If you ever try this, you'll laugh watching how consistent this worked for me, because this is not as easy as I'm apparently making it look. It takes a lot of attention to pressure, timing, how far out you pull, and the little things like, just stretching it twice. So this is another 2.5 foot piece that I'll use to braid for something. We probably have 30 or 40 feet down here in the bucket. I doubt that I'll get all the way through that before I break it again. There it goes. I'm just going to throw that one over my shoulders. Do it again. This hide had a lot of bites in the flank, and rather than cut around it, I just cut through all of it. Decided to make it into string, wet stretch it, and compact it and see how much I could make use of, because the hide itself, I wouldn't have thought that I could get this. That one snapped. You end up with weird blisters on the bottoms of your hands and between your fingers. Down to 20 feet or so, 25 feet maybe. It's hard to judge it in the bucket, but you can see there's wide variances where the leather was so thin that it slipped under the fence of the tool I was using. That's one reason this is breaking in places. It's a 6 foot piece or so. It's about 1.5 feet, 18 inches. Like I said, when I get to the end of this string here, I didn't expect it to hold together so well. That's where most of the bug bites were, in the flanks. feet. I'm gonna run it back through. I'm down to 6 feet. Okay, so wrap it, squeeze more water out. I used to get frustrated when this stuff broke, but then I realized its value in pre-stretching it is really the reduction in frustration when you're breathing, having it snap while you're breathing it. This is a longer piece, about 8 foot long. And then I've got a 6 foot piece-ish around my neck. Ouch. My hands are starting to talk to me and blister up. A lot of friction in this process. Puts a lot of pressure on your hands as well as the string. You can get an idea as to how consistent the string is after you wet stretch it. And I don't like that area in there, so I'll knock it back. And I'll bevel this strip. You might wonder how many pieces broke into pieces. Here's the longer ones. So that's what didn't get hanked up, is all these pieces. And I'm going to roll them up like so. And then I'm going to toss them into the bucket so they can stay tempered up. Well, you can do a lot of things, so soft leather finger cap. Yeah, I just have blisters. See the little blisters? I don't know if you can see the blisters. Those will be gone tomorrow. Like, they're there right now. And I've been working on this for about an hour. It took me an hour to cut up the hide into one long strand or two long strands. I don't tool either, so. And then I'll show you a trick or two. So this is a swivel, and this is a hook. If you have some strips of this, you tie a knot, a stop knot. You can drop it in here. You can spin it like you would hand spin a cracker, keep the flesh side in. Yes, I'm being meticulous with this. I always do this by hand because I can get a better lay for this twine that I'm going to spin out of this. Make a nice little bracelet or something, spun cord for the core for something you braid. Somebody's too high to watch. That's funny. I suspected a number of people were smoking and watching me do some of this stuff because people are like, dude, what you doing? I almost hear it. A lot of stuff I do, most people have never seen anybody do, so. It's not like spinning is not an art practiced all over the world. But spinning leather is something you don't hardly ever see done. I'm going to show you a couple tricks as long as I've got these little short scraps. This is about 18 inches long after it's spun. This piece was a couple feet long to start with, roughly. One trick you can use with this is you can tie a knot at the end to spin with, which helps you tighten it up and squeeze more of the water out. Use both fingers. I guess you can't see my both fingers, but spin it tight. And take a piece of wire or crook and fold it. Spin it. And that's a very loose lay, so this is a very loose thing. And then put this on the hook, right? I'm going to move this so you can actually see, hopefully. You pull it all the way out. You try not to let go of it. Pull it all the way out. You keep spinning these so you get a tighter lay of the cord. Then you can tie an overhand knot to just lock it off. Then you take it off of here. You come back up to the hook. You untwist it over the hook so you can get it on the hook, right? And you untwist it some more. And you twist this down and compact it till it's over twisted. You grab a scrap of leather, you fold it over the tip, and you compact and polish it. Now the eye will stay open. So that you can toss it on and make a key ring out of it or something. Isn't that pretty? So, yep. It's the same process for any fiber. Show you a quick example of another trick with leather. So this is the scrap from cutting deer skin and beveling it, so it's kind of mostly flesh side. So I'm going to take, I don't know, 5 or 6 feet, okay, 7 feet, and I can barely break it. Slide your spinning tool up, just tie an overhand knot. This is a stop knot. Take a block of beeswax, if it wants to fight you, don't argue with it. It's red, it needs to be on the hook if it's going to fight you. Take your beeswax and just rub down the whole piece of string. This is 7 feet, so I'm off camera. And remember, this is a script, a piece of deer skin. And this wax gets hot enough it melts with the friction. And I'm just going to tie a knot, a couple twists, give me something to spin on, and I'm going to get a little spinning hook, really small one. Well, thank you for subscribing. I appreciate it. I always need more subscribers. I've got like maybe 1,000 people. It's not very many, but it's more than a lot of people have. So I'm grateful every time somebody chooses to follow me and subscribe and all that. So I'm just tensioning up this long strand. So I'm going to grab my scrap of junk, scrap of stuff. I'm going to melt that beeswax into the strand. You can see it change color. That kind of helps lock it and compact it. Melts that wax into the fibers of the deer skin. Add some more tension. Somebody was asking why I don't use a drill, and it's like, well, I spin a lot of stuff by hand. I don't use drills. I don't think that's by hand, in my opinion. Okay. So then I'm going to put this on the spinner. I'm going to try and lower this a little bit. And the main secret to this is finding the center of it and evening the tension out a little bit. I see that I am a poor cameraman, I'm sorry. And this is currently a very loose lay. Let me pull it out. That evens the tension up and it gets a little more tension. And you add more spin. Try and keep the corgi hair out. Much as I try, it still ends up in the fibers. Let me pull it all the way out. Try and lay it at 45 degrees as best you can. And try and get it as consistent as you can. And mind you, this is a 3-foot cord. Ish. Now the top part of that has pretty good tension. The bottom part is just laying pretty loose, but I keep spinning it closed. You pull it in opposite directions and relay it. Pull it up even more. And this is really how you get the best amount of tension into where you're going. And you don't get the same kind of tension with a drill, you're gonna be wildly out from where you think you ought to be. You'll never get both sides evenly tensioned. That's why I spin it with my fingers. Tie it overhand knot. Move the hook out of the way. And the thing, and you unspin this across the top of a big 1/4-inch hook to create an eye. And then the secret to getting that eye to set is to unspin it for 1/2 inch or more, and then slowly spin it closed, and overspin it. Of course, I am a poor cameraman. So you unspin it, you get it on the big hook. You unspin it so that you can get your finger in there. And what that does is it pulls the tension out of this loop. Then you overspin it and crunch it down. And pull on it as you seat the twists. And you'll squeeze a bunch of the air space out of the deer skin and get the fibers intertangled. I said that strip. Okay, so here's my little strip of leather. So if you wrap this strip compact that string. If you want to add more beeswax, you can grab your puck of beeswax and melt some more beeswax into it. So this is really stretchy because it is deer, but once you compact it, and wax it and compact it, it takes a lot of the stretch out of the deer. Beeswax melts at 180 degrees Fahrenheit roughly. See it change color as it melts the wax. So we took not even decent deer lace, but the offcut from making nice even deer lace, and turned it into twine. And with any luck, we can pull this eye off, and the eye will stay open, and that will let us tuck the tail through. Where I tied the knot. And you can kind of twist that closed, and then it'll be a necklace. So that's about 18 inches for the loop. It's a 36-inch necklace, basically, out of deer skin. And I started off with just scraps of making the lace. People say, what's the lace look like? That's the beveled deerskin lace. See the bevel? The underside of the deerskin lace. And this is the offcut from this lace. I'm trying to make it 1/4 inch. It's a spool about 75 yards. 50 yards, something like that on this little spool. But be creative, try stuff, share it with other people. 100 things to do with it. You're welcome. I don't have these up anywhere because I usually don't sell them. But if you want one of these, message me. Maybe I'll start putting them on the website. It's pocketsnakes.com. I'm going to sign off for the night because my blisters are talking to me from working. Have a great night.